proposition for everyone. What if I told you that myself and a team of about 50 people could make you and the company you own over $70 million a year? In return, you would pay us for a room or a place to stay. You give us access to any of the facilities that you have, as well as supply us with the tools necessary to get the job done. This kind of activity goes on year after year at major college institutions around America in reference to the money made through college athletics and the money spent in athletic scholarships. Today we're going to look at some of the figures of a few major college institutions in America. We're going to discuss the pros and cons to being a student athlete and some of the obstacles they face, as well as some of the ideas that I have for paying these student athletes additional amounts of money to help them with their finances. Let's start by looking at some of the figures at some major college institutions. According to an article in Forbes magazine called The Business of College Football, the University of Texas is worth $129 million, which is the most valuable football team in America. Even after we subtract the amount of money that Texas spends to go back into the institution in programs, in upgrades, in facilities, etc., they still made $71 million in football alone. $71 million. That's an amazing number considering that a football season only lasts about 5 months. The second and third most valuable teams listed in America are Notre Dame at $112 million and Penn State at $100 million. Now let's talk about scholarships. A scholarship includes tuition, room and board, and course-related books. A football team will have 85 scholarship players on it in a given year. That being said, a scholarship can go anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 depending on the school you go to. Private schools are usually more expensive. But for a school like Texas, it would range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. When you crunch those numbers, Texas spends a total of about $2 million in athletic scholarships for a football team. Yet they made $71 million. That's 35 times the amount that the players make. 35 times the amount. So now that we've crunched the numbers and you understand what I'm talking about, let's look at the perspective from the student athletes and the obstacles they face. Again, a scholarship will cover tuition, room and board, and course-related books. But what about the additional expenses of a college athlete? Expenses such as clothing, vehicles, whether it be fuel, whether it be maintenance. A lot of the schools are too large to move around, whether it be by foot, by bike, by bus. College athletes have a very, very busy schedule being a full-time student as well as a full-time athlete. After the first or second year, usually a lot of students, most students in college athletics especially, are required to move off campus to make room for the incoming students. With that being said, you add in additional expenses such as groceries, bills, and rent. Because of this, a lot of athletes, hundreds of them, have been caught illegally trying to make ends meet. Some have taken monies from boosters, which is illegal in all of college sports, as well as even going far as stealing and selling merchandise to try to make money to help them financially. Now, it's not all bad for the over 400,000 Division I college athletes. A lot of these schools have a lot of media coverage, some even signing broadcast contracts with a broadcast company. Every game, every performance is on the air. You get a lot of notoriety, you get a lot of fame, and even opportunity to play at a higher level, the professional level, and get paid for it. Also, awards in college football, such as the Jim Thorpe Award given to the best defensive back or the Heisman Trophy given to the overall best defensive player, can lead to autograph signing contracts. These contracts could be signed with companies to have the player come in, sit down, sign autographs on merchandise to the fan base, and depending on the fan base, the athlete can make up to and over $1 million. Now that we looked at the perspective of a college athlete, some of the pros and cons to that, let's take a look at some of the ideas that I have for college athletes to be paid. I think the college athletes could be paid a lot like military members are in forms of housing and services. if you take each player and give them a certain amount of money for services, an allowance for services or an allowance for housing for those living off of campus, and you make it standard across America, across Division I college, then you don't have a problem with certain schools having more money and having an advantage when it comes to recruiting. If you take freshmen and even sophomores maybe and prohibiting them from moving off campus, then what you have is you have a situation where those people don't have to get the allowance for housing, just the allowance for services, and then that will cover some of the finances that they need, as far as whether it be for clothing, laundry, fuel, gas, or whatever maintenance they need for their cars. So now that we discussed the ideas that I have for some payments, let's look back at what we covered. We went over some figures for a few major institutions. We looked at that. We crunched the numbers to the income they have coming in to what they spend for the students. We looked at a perspective from the student athletes as far as what they face financially and also academically. And we also went over the ideas I had for paying these student athletes additional income and looking at ways to do that as well. The most valuable institutions in America are making hundreds of million dollars a year off student athletes. If you can make that much, then shouldn't the student athlete, the person that's helping the institution make that money, somehow be compensated? I hope today I influenced you in looking at this situation and persuading you to believe that college athletes are performing at a very, very high standard and need to be awarded through finances.